In the vast, sun-scorched outback of South Australia, the land stretches endlessly, red earth, dry winds, and silence that can swallow a sound whole. It's the kind of place where people know each other by name, where nothing much changes, and where danger feels like a distant thought. Until one day, it wasn't. 4-year-old Gus Lamont vanished without a trace. No sound, no witness, no clue, just gone. To his family, Gus was the kind of child that brightened the quietest days, curious, playful, always exploring the small world around him. But on that afternoon, the laughter stopped. In its place came confusion, fear, and a silence so deep it seemed to echo through the desert. When police arrived, the scene was unnervingly calm. No sign of a struggle, no trail to follow. Only a few scattered toys and the faint imprint of tiny feet in the dust, footsteps that led nowhere. How does a child disappear in an open field where every direction is visible? How can someone so small simply vanish from a place so vast? The search for Gus Lamont would grow into one of the most haunting mysteries Australia has ever faced, one that exposes deep fractures within a family, unanswered questions within a community, and unsettling possibilities that reach far beyond the ordinary. This is not just a story about a missing boy. It's about what happens when truth hides in plain sight, and when silence becomes more chilling than the unknown. Stay with me as we uncover the disturbing twists, the overlooked evidence, and the theories that could change everything you think you know about this case. And before we dive deeper, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because in stories like this, every detail matters, and the truth is never simple. It was a quiet afternoon on the Lamont property, the kind of stillness that feels ordinary in the outback. Dry air, faint wind, nothing unusual. Gus was playing near the sandpit beside his grandmother's house. Shannon Murray, his grandmother, said she stepped inside for just a moment. When she came back out, Gus was gone. At first, she thought he'd wandered off, maybe chasing the dog or a bird. But after a few minutes of calling his name and getting no answer, worry turned into panic. She searched the yard, the sheds, the nearby trees. Nothing, not a sound, not a footprint leading away. 3 hours passed before the call to police was made. 3 hours. In that time, the trail had gone cold. By the time officers arrived, the light was fading, and the heat of the day had started to drop. Police, volunteers, and neighbors spread out through the property. They checked the water tanks, the creek beds, the fences, the open paddocks. A helicopter swept over the area, scanning with thermal cameras. Nothing. The next morning, hundreds joined the search. It became one of the largest coordinated efforts the region had seen. But every hour that passed without a sign of Gus made hope harder to hold on to. No clothing, no shoes, no tracks, just silence. And in that silence, questions started to grow. Why did it take 3 hours to make the call? Why didn't anyone notice him leave? And why, in a place so open, did no one see where he went? When police took over the case, they treated it first as a standard search and rescue, a child lost in the bush. They brought in tracker dogs, drones, and mounted patrols. Every inch of the Lamont property and the surrounding land was combed through. But as the hours turned into days, something changed. The operation shifted from rescue to recovery. It was no longer just about finding Gus alive. It was about finding any trace of him at all. Detectives began to focus on inconsistencies. The first was the timeline. Why did 3 critical hours pass before anyone contacted authorities? In those 3 hours, a 4-year-old could have wandered kilometers away or been taken. Then came the second inconsistency, the grandmother's demeanor. Shannon Murray appeared calm, even detached, during the interviews. Neighbors described her as unusually composed. Police noted it too. There were no visible signs of distress, no outbursts, no desperation, just steady, quiet answers. Was it shock or something else? Investigators also looked into her background. Shannon had transitioned years earlier, a part of her life that had drawn some public attention. But what interested detectives wasn't her identity. It was her history. Who she had been, where she had lived, who she was connected to. Meanwhile, the property itself became a puzzle. It was vast but open. Flat land stretching for miles. From most angles, you could see everything. So how does a small child disappear without a trace in a place where you can see from one end to the other? A single footprint was found near a fence line, about 300 meters from the house. At first, it was thought to belong to Gus, but later forensic experts ruled it out. The soil didn't match the shoes he was wearing. Days later, the hope of finding him alive began to fade. The harsh weather, blazing days, freezing nights, made survival nearly impossible. On October 17th, 10 days after he vanished, police officially called off the search. But not everyone agreed with that decision. Some volunteers insisted that the search area was wrong, that Gus might never have been on the property when he disappeared. Others questioned whether the footprint was dismissed too quickly. Even a tracker involved in the operation raised doubts, suggesting it could have been a decoy. And as the official search ended, whispers began to spread, not about wildlife or weather, but about people and what they might be hiding. When the search failed to bring results, attention turned inward, to the Lamont family. Police began retracing the hours before Gus vanished, looking closely at every interaction, every phone call, every movement. It was soon revealed that Gus's parents weren't on the property that day. His mother, Jess, was tending to the sheep on another part of the land. His father, Gus Lamont, was nearly 100 kilometers away in Ballia North. That left Shannon Murray, the grandmother, as the only adult with Gus when he disappeared. That fact alone changed everything. Why was she alone with him? Why did she wait so long to call for help? And why did she delay telling Josh that his son was missing? Detectives questioned her repeatedly, but her answers remained consistent. She thought Gus was just playing nearby. She said she didn't want to cause a fuss until she was sure he was gone. But to investigators, that explanation didn't sit right. Every parent knows that with a missing child, minutes matter, not hours. Then came another strange detail: Shannon's behavior after the disappearance. While the community searched day and night, she stayed calm, quiet, and at times almost distant. Some took it as composure. Others saw it as something far colder. Forensic psychologists later noted that such calmness can sometimes be a defense mechanism, a sign of shock, denial, or emotional suppression. But in other cases, it can indicate knowledge or guilt. Police began digging into Shannon's past. Her transition from Robert Murray to Shannon Murray was public knowledge. But what caught their attention were the changes in her personal life during that time: strained family ties, financial troubles, and reported conflicts within the household. Still, there was no direct evidence linking her to Gus's disappearance. No signs of violence, no signs of a struggle, just absence and silence. Then came the whispers. Neighbors claimed there was tension between Shannon and Gus's parents. Some even suggested that the family had been divided over Gus's care. Others described Shannon as secretive, keeping to herself in the months before Gus went missing. Police took statements, reviewed call logs, and examined the grandmother's movements that day. Everything looked normal, almost too normal. By the end of the second week, investigators had more questions than answers. Was this truly a tragic accident, or was there something more hidden beneath the surface? Something the family wasn't saying. And while police publicly maintained that they were keeping all options open, behind closed doors, the case was already shifting from a search for a missing child to a full-scale criminal investigation. From the moment Gus disappeared, Shannon Murray's composure became one of the most puzzling aspects of the entire case. While most would expect panic, tears, and desperation, Shannon's demeanor remained steady, almost detached. To some, it looked like strength. To others, it felt wrong. Psychologists who followed the case offered two possibilities. The first, emotional shock. In traumatic situations, the brain can shut down normal emotional responses as a way to protect itself. Instead of breaking down, a person may seem cold or expressionless. It's not that they don't care. It's that their mind is struggling to process the reality in front of them. The second, concealment. Sometimes calmness can be the mask of someone holding back, someone afraid of what they might reveal if they lose control. Guilt, fear, or even knowledge of what truly happened can manifest as silence. So which was it in Shannon's case? When interviewed, she spoke softly, offering short, factual answers. No emotion, no outbursts, just statements like, "He was playing near the sandpit. I went inside for a minute. When I came out, he was gone." Experts in behavioral analysis noted that Shannon's tone lacked typical signs of distress: irregular breathing, broken speech, emotional inconsistency. Instead, she seemed rehearsed, controlled. Then came a key question: why the delay? 3 hours before reporting a missing 4-year-old is nearly unthinkable. That delay could have been crucial. Psychologically, such hesitation could stem from denial, a refusal to accept the worst. But it could also signal fear, fear of what others might think, or of what might be discovered. There's also the matter of guilt. Some experts suggested Shannon may have feared judgment from both family and authorities. Having recently transitioned, she might have been struggling with feelings of insecurity or social scrutiny. The thought of being blamed for Gus's disappearance could have been paralyzing. Still, the lack of visible panic made many uneasy. Even police privately questioned whether Shannon's calmness was genuine shock or something far more deliberate. And as the investigation deepened, that calm facade began to crack. Reports surfaced of inconsistencies in her statements, small details that changed under pressure. Where exactly she was standing when Gus disappeared, how long she had been inside, whether she heard anything before realizing he was gone. Each version was slightly different. Individually, they might have been harmless errors, but together they painted a picture of confusion or control. As days passed and hope faded, Shannon's silence grew heavier. Not a single public plea, not one tearful message asking for Gus's return. The question lingered. Was she simply coping her own way, or was her silence hiding something deeper? Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. Her behavior was not what anyone expected from a grandmother who had lost her grandson in the middle of nowhere. And that left police and the public wondering what really happened in those missing hours. As the investigation dragged on without answers, the public's imagination began to fill the silence. Everyone had a theory, and each one seemed more complicated than the last. The police focused first on the most straightforward explanation: misadventure. A curious 4-year-old wanders off into the bush, loses his bearings, and never finds his way back. The harsh terrain and temperature swings could easily claim a child's life within hours. But that theory quickly started to unravel. No clothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing. Then came the second theory: wildlife involvement. Dingoes, foxes, feral cats, and wedge-tailed eagles all roamed the area. Former homicide detective Charlie Bazina even suggested it could have been an animal attack. Yet experts countered: if an animal had taken Gus, there would have been evidence. Drag marks, disturbed soil, torn fabric. There was none. Next was the theory that divided the community: abduction. Some believed someone had entered the property and taken Gus, either by chance or with intent. But again, how could that happen in an open landscape where anyone approaching would be seen from a distance? The Lamont property was remote, but visibility stretched for kilometers. There were no tire tracks, no signs of forced entry, and no witnesses. Still, detectives couldn't rule it out. The 3-hour delay gave plenty of time for something, or someone, to happen unseen. Then came the whispers online, the grandmother theory. People started asking hard questions about Shannon Murray's role. Why the delay? Why the calmness? Why no emotional reaction? No public appeal? Some even speculated that her version of events didn't line up with the timeline the police were building. Her transition, a deeply personal and unrelated part of her life, became unfairly dragged into the public debate. Comment sections and forums filled with speculation, some trying to understand her psychology, others using it to vilify her. The media began walking a fine line between investigation and intrusion. But there was another theory few wanted to touch: the possibility that Gus never disappeared from that sandpit at all. Some volunteers, including experienced searchers, argued that the search zone itself didn't make sense. The footprint found near the fence line, first linked to Gus, then dismissed, raised suspicions. Could the footprint have been planted? Could Gus have been moved elsewhere before the search began? Without evidence, every theory was just speculation. But speculation is a powerful thing. It shapes narratives, spreads doubt, and blurs the line between truth and rumor. And as the case dragged on, one thing became clear: everyone from the police to the public was looking for answers in a place where almost nothing made sense. The question wasn't just what happened to Gus Lamont. It was, how could a child vanish completely in a place where vanishing should be impossible? As weeks turned into months, the Lamont family withdrew from the public eye. The initial media appearances stopped. The social media posts about the search went silent, and slowly a sense of unease crept into the community. Neighbors described a change, a distance that hadn't been there before. The Lamonts, once known for their openness and warmth, became guarded. Calls from reporters went unanswered. The family stopped attending local gatherings. Even those closest to them said it was as though a wall had gone up. Inside that wall, investigators believed, were answers, or at least pieces of them. Privately, police admitted the family's timeline still had gaps. Phone records didn't fully match statements. There were periods short, but critical, that no one could account for. And each time officers pressed for clarification, they got the same line, "We've told you everything we know." But not everything added up. Detectives started revisiting the hours before Gus disappeared. Why did no one else see him that morning? Why did it take 3 hours for the alarm to be raised? And why, after all this time, did no one seem to have the faintest idea what happened? Some speculated that the silence wasn't just grief, it was protection. Protection from scrutiny, from guilt, or perhaps from each other. Families under this kind of pressure often fracture. Secrets, even small ones, start to surface. A former police consultant said, "When you have a case like this, you don't just look for what people say, you look for what they don't say." And in this case, there was a lot unsaid. Reports leaked of tension between Josh and Shannon in the days following Gus's disappearance. Arguments behind closed doors. Accusations of blame. A father demanding answers that no one could give. A grandmother standing by her story, refusing to change a word. Still, there was no proof of wrongdoing. No arrest. No body. Just a family, broken and isolated, shadowed by questions they could no longer escape. Journalists continued to press for interviews, but the Lamonts issued a single statement through a lawyer, a brief, polished sentence that said everything and nothing. To this day, no one can say with certainty what happened to Gus Lamont in the vast, empty stretch of the Australian outback. What's known are fragments, traces of a timeline that never quite fits together, moments that feel just out of reach. At 11:47 a.m., Shannon Murray last recalls seeing Gus near the sandpit, playing with his toy truck. The next clear fact comes at 2:56 p.m., when she finally called police. Between those times, there is nothing. 3 hours, one child, gone. Search teams combed through hundreds of kilometers of scrubland, using drones, dogs, and even heat-sensing equipment. The result, not a single trace. No clothing, no footprints, no scent. It was as if Gus had vanished into thin air. That's when investigators started using the phrase, vanishing point. Because somewhere in that short window, between routine and disaster, something irreversible happened. If it was an accident, nature hid the evidence too well. If it was abduction, it was executed with surgical precision. If it was something closer to home, someone carried that truth with a silence so heavy it crushed everything around it. Over time, the case became less about finding Gus and more about understanding the impossibility of his disappearance. How could a 4-year-old disappear with no trace, in broad daylight, from a property surrounded by open space? Locals began describing the land itself as cursed, the kind of place that keeps its secrets. But investigators didn't buy into superstition. They believed there was an explanation, one hidden in the smallest details, buried beneath human behavior, fear and memory. Then came the discovery of a single child's footprint near the fence line, about 70 meters from the house. At first, it seemed like the breakthrough everyone was waiting for. But when compared to Gus's shoes, it didn't match. The size was slightly off, too small, too shallow. It was dismissed as unrelated. But some searchers never accepted that. One retired tracker later told a local paper, "That print was fresh, less than an hour old when I saw it. Someone was there, someone small, and I'll never believe otherwise." Yet without more evidence, the case stalled. The official line remained unchanged. Gus Lamont was missing, presumed dead. But off the record, detectives quietly admitted something darker. They believed they knew more about what didn't happen than what did. No predator, no stranger, no signs of accident, just absence. And for some, that's the most chilling theory of all. That Gus's disappearance wasn't random or external. It was something closer, something that lived behind the same walls he once called home. To this day, there are no charges, no closure, only questions. And maybe that's what makes the case so haunting. Because when a child disappears, you expect to find something, anything, left behind. But in the story of Gus Lamont, there's nothing, just a void in the red dust, and a silence that refuses to end. The disappearance of Gus Lamont has become more than a mystery. It's a wound that never healed, not just for one family, but for an entire community that refuses to forget. Every year, on the anniversary of that day, a small group of locals gathers near the property. They leave flowers, toy trucks, and handwritten notes with a single name. Gus. No one says much. They don't have to. The silence says enough. The investigation remains open, though quiet. Detectives still receive the occasional tip, a possible sighting, a rumor, a theory whispered from one town to another. Each time, the police follow the lead, and each time, it leads nowhere. But what keeps this case alive isn't evidence, it's emotion. The sense that something so wrong, so unnatural, can't simply fade into the background. That somewhere out there, someone knows the truth. Because disappearances don't happen in isolation. Someone saw something. Someone heard something. Someone remembers. This isn't just about one missing child. It's about accountability, about justice, and about how silence, deliberate or fearful, can bury the truth deeper than any desert sand ever could. If Gus is gone, then someone took him, or something happened to him. And that means there are answers, waiting to be found. The only question is, who has the courage to speak? For those listening now, if you know anything, even the smallest detail, come forward. It may not seem like much, but in cases like this, one sentence can reopen a path that's long been cold. Because stories like Gus's don't end until the truth is told. And until that day comes, his name will remain a quiet echo across the Outback, a reminder that in every unsolved case, there's more than one victim: the lost, the grieving, and those still waiting for answers. If you have information about the disappearance of Gus Lamont, please contact local authorities or Crime Stoppers. Justice begins with truth, and sometimes truth begins with a single voice. There's something haunting about an unfinished story, a case that ends without answers, without closure. The disappearance of Gus Lamont is one of those stories that lingers long after the headlines fade. It's not just the mystery that unsettles people, it's the silence that follows it. In the stillness of the Outback, where the wind carries dust and memory, people still speak his name. They speak it quietly, sometimes to the air, sometimes to themselves, as if saying it might somehow bring him back. For investigators, it's the kind of case that doesn't rest. Files remain open, notes scribbled in margins, photographs pinned to boards, collecting time instead of evidence. Every few months, someone revisits the timeline, hoping a new perspective will crack the code that's held the truth hostage. But for the Lamont family, the weight of that silence is personal. It's not just the absence of a boy, it's the absence of peace. Each unanswered question becomes a scar, each day without news. Another reminder that the story isn't over. People often ask how something like this can happen, how a child can simply vanish. The truth is, sometimes the world doesn't give us neat endings. Sometimes justice moves too slowly. Sometimes it never comes. And yet, the story of Gus Lamont endures because people want to believe there's still a chance, that somewhere, somehow, the truth still exists, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. Until that day, all that remains is a name, a face, and a promise that the search will never stop. Because even when time moves on, stories like this refuse to die. They wait, in files and memories and hearts, for the one person who finally listens to what's been silent all along. And maybe one day, the Outback will speak. When it does, perhaps we'll finally know what happened to Gus Lamont. Until then, this case remains open. If this story has left you thinking, don't let it fade into the noise. Somewhere out there, someone knows something, a detail, a sound, a memory that didn't seem important at the time. Cases like Gus Lamont's aren't solved by silence. They're solved by persistence. So if you have any information, no matter how small, contact local authorities or Crime Stoppers. Sometimes the tiniest clue can break a case wide open. And if you want to keep following stories like this, stories that dig deeper, that question what others ignore, make sure to subscribe to Crime Zone. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update, because we'll be following this case until the truth surfaces. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think happened to Gus Lamont? Was this a tragic accident, or something far darker? Your voice matters. Every comment, every share, keeps Gus's story alive, and ensures the world doesn't forget him. This is Crime Zone, where we don't just tell stories, we search for answers. And until the truth comes out, we keep digging. At this stage, the case remains open. No physical evidence, no confirmed sightings, and no new leads have surfaced. The only thing certain is that a 4-year-old boy vanished under circumstances that don't add up. The grandmother's account has inconsistencies. The timeline is fractured, and the family's silence raises more questions than answers. Every missing piece points to one fact: something critical happened in those 3 unaccounted hours. Until new evidence emerges, we're left with a gap, a space between what's been said and what really happened. And in cases like this, that gap is where the truth usually hides. We'll keep tracking this one, piece by piece, because somewhere in that silence, there's a story that hasn't been told yet, and it's our